The morning fog rolled across the San Francisco Bay as Elena Morales sat at her kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. 23 years had passed since her son Miguel disappeared, but the ache in her chest felt as fresh as the day it happened. At 17, Miguel had been the star point guard of Roosevelt High's basketball team, with college scouts already calling and a bright future ahead of him. Her husband Carlos entered the kitchen, his graying hair still disheveled from sleep. "Another restless night?" he asked gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Elena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "How do you explain to someone that you still wake up every morning hoping today will be the day you get answers?" The shrill ring of her phone cut through the silence. Elena glanced at the caller ID and froze. Detective Sonia Cartwright, the investigator who had worked Miguel's case all those years ago. "Carlos," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's Detective Cartwright." Carlos's eyes widened. They hadn't heard from the detective in over 5 years. With trembling fingers, Elena answered the call. "Mrs. Morales? This is Detective Cartwright. I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, Detective. Is there news?" "We have a significant development in Miguel's case. Can you and your husband come to the station this morning? The sooner the better." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. After 23 years of silence, any news seemed impossible. "We'll be there in an hour." The drive to the SFPD station felt both eternal and instantaneous. Elena clutched Carlos's hand as they navigated the morning traffic, neither speaking but both thinking the same thoughts. What if this was finally it? What if they were about to learn what happened to their son? The police station buzzed with activity as Elena and Carlos were escorted to a conference room. Inside, they found familiar faces, other parents who had lived through the same nightmare. The Andersons, whose son Tyler had vanished with Miguel. The Johnsons, parents of Deshawn. The Williamses, Morris's family. All of them connected by the same terrible night when 7 promising young basketball players simply disappeared. Detective Cartwright entered, her once dark hair now streaked with silver, the lines around her eyes deeper than Elena remembered. "Thank you all for coming so quickly," she began, her voice measured but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. "Early this morning, a construction crew working on a new housing development in Daly City discovered something we believe is connected to your son's disappearance." She clicked a remote and an image appeared on the wall screen. A weathered duffel bag, partially buried beneath concrete debris, its contents spilling out, basketball jerseys in Roosevelt High's distinctive brown and white colors. "Roosevelt High," whispered Mrs. Anderson, her hand flying to her mouth. Elena leaned forward, straining to see the details. The jerseys were faded and dirty, but unmistakably the same ones the boys had worn the night they vanished. "The construction foreman called us immediately," Detective Cartwright continued. "We've cordoned off the area and brought in forensics. But there's more." She clicked to another image. This was found with the jerseys. The screen showed a championship ring, the same type the team had received after winning the state semifinals just days before they disappeared. "We need to see the site," Elena said firmly, surprising herself with her determination. "I need to see where this was found." The other parents murmured agreement, and Detective Cartwright nodded reluctantly. "I'll need to clear it with the site supervisor, but I understand your need to see this for yourselves." An hour later, their convoy of vehicles pulled up to the construction site in Daly City. The area was cordoned off with yellow tape, and several officers moved methodically around the discovery location. Elena's eyes were immediately drawn to a man standing near the excavation equipment with a hard hat in his hands. "That's Ray Nakamura, the foreman who made the discovery," Detective Cartwright explained as they approached. "He's been very cooperative." Ray stepped forward, his weathered face creased with concern. "I'm sorry you folks have to go through this," he said, shaking hands with each parent. "When we found that bag, I knew right away it was something important. Those jerseys, they looked like they'd been buried for a long time." "How long has this area been undeveloped?" Carlos asked. "Since before I started working construction 25 years ago," Ray replied. "It was just empty land, too close to the old industrial district for anyone to want to build on. Only recently did the city approve residential development here." Elena surveyed the desolate landscape, trying to imagine her son in this place. "Why here?" what had brought the boys to this remote location. As they examined the site, Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. Tire tracks in the dried mud, leading from the main road to the discovery site. Fresh tracks. "Detective," she called out, pointing to the tracks. "Those look recent." Detective Cartwright followed her gaze and immediately called over a forensics technician. "Get photos of these tracks and take casts. Someone's been here recently." Back at the station, Detective Cartwright gathered the parents in the conference room again. "We've identified the ring," she announced. It belonged to Morris Williams. Mrs. Williams broke down sobbing, and Elena felt her own eyes fill with tears. After 23 years, they finally had proof that something terrible had happened to their sons. "There's something else," Detective Cartwright continued. "We ran the serial numbers on some equipment found near the site. The excavation tools are registered to a company called Pacific Development Solutions." Elena frowned. "I've never heard of that company." "That's because it's a subsidiary of Elite Athletic Training, owned by..." Detective Cartwright paused, consulting her notes. Brandon Kowalski. The name hit Elena like a physical blow. Brandon Kowalski had been Miguel's private basketball coach, the man who had promised to get him into a Division I college program. He had been questioned extensively after the boys' disappearance, but was never charged. "Coach Kowalski," Mr. Anderson said slowly. "But he was cleared during the investigation." "That's what we thought," Detective Cartwright replied grimly. "But we're taking another look at his involvement. We've discovered some financial irregularities in his business records from that time period." Elena's mind raced. Kowalski had been charismatic, convincing parents that he could make their sons' dreams come true. He had worked with several elite athletes and had connections throughout the college basketball world. "What kind of irregularities?" Carlos asked. "Large cash deposits that don't match his reported income. Travel expenses that don't align with his stated business activities. And most interesting, he purchased a property in Nevada just weeks after the boys disappeared." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Nevada? A remote ranch about 3 hours from here. We're getting a warrant to search it." The Nevada ranch sat in a valley surrounded by barren hills, its isolation complete. Elena and Carlos had insisted on coming with the police, despite Detective Cartwright's initial reluctance. They needed to see this through, no matter what they found. The property consisted of a main house, several outbuildings, and what appeared to be a large recreational facility. It looked like any other rural retreat, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Mr. Kowalski isn't here," one of the officers reported after checking the main house. "Neighbors say he left about a week ago." Detective Cartwright's expression darkened. Right after the construction crew found the jerseys, as they searched the property, Elena wandered toward the recreational building. Through the windows, she could see a basketball court inside, a full regulation court with professional-grade equipment. Above the court, she noticed something that made her heart stop. Banners hung from the rafters, displaying the names and numbers of various basketball players. And there, in the center, was a banner with Miguel's name and number. "Detective," she called out, her voice breaking. "You need to see this." The group rushed over, and Detective Cartwright immediately called for backup. The building was locked, but they could see through the windows that it wasn't just a basketball court. There were living quarters visible at one end, beds, a kitchen area, and what looked like a common room. "This looks like some kind of training facility," Carlos observed. "Or a prison," Detective Cartwright replied grimly. The search warrant for the ranch revealed a complex operation. Hidden in the main house, investigators found detailed records of Kowalski's activities over the past 2 decades. Financial documents, travel records, and most damning of all, a journal detailing his obsession with creating the perfect basketball team. Elena sat in the ranch's main room, surrounded by evidence of her son's captivity, as Detective Cartwright explained what they had discovered. Kowalski had been recruiting talented young players for years, she said. He convinced them and their families that he could provide elite training that would guarantee college scholarships. But instead of training them for college, he was training them for underground basketball gambling operations. The journal entries painted a picture of a man who had become increasingly unhinged in his pursuit of athletic perfection. He had convinced himself that he was doing the boys a favor by removing them from the distractions of normal teenage life. The boys were kept here for months, Detective Cartwright continued, forced to practice and play in illegal games that Kowalski used to fund his operation. When they tried to resist or escape, she didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were clear. Where are they now? Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. We're still searching the property. But, Elena, you need to prepare yourself. After 23 years, Elena nodded, understanding. Her son was gone. They all were. Over the following days, the investigation expanded beyond the ranch. Kowalski had fled, but his network of associates began to unravel. Police discovered that his operation had been larger than anyone had imagined, with connections to illegal gambling rings across the western United States. The construction site in Daly City yielded more evidence. Forensics teams found remains buried beneath the concrete, the final resting place of the 7 young men who had vanished so long ago. Elena attended the press conference where Detective Cartwright announced the findings. The media attention was overwhelming, but she felt a responsibility to speak for her son and the other boys who could no longer speak for themselves. Miguel was 17 years old, she said into the microphone, her voice steady despite her tears. He loved basketball, but more than that, he loved his family and his friends. He didn't deserve what happened to him. None of these boys did. The investigation revealed that Kowalski had been running his operation for over a decade, recruiting young athletes from across California and Nevada. The boys who had tried to escape or resist had been murdered, while others had been forced to participate in illegal games until they were too old or too broken to continue. Brandon Kowalski was arrested at a border crossing in Arizona, attempting to flee to Mexico. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Financial records, DNA evidence from the ranch, and testimony from several associates who agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. Elena attended every day of his trial, determined to be there for Miguel and the other boys. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts of kidnapping, murder, and racketeering, she felt a mixture of relief and emptiness. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring back her son. Mrs. Morales, Kowalski's defense attorney, approached her after the sentencing. My client wanted me to give you this. He handed her a letter. Elena hesitated, then took it. Inside was a brief note from Kowalski, expressing what he claimed was remorse for his actions. At the bottom, he had written, Miguel talked about you every day. He never stopped believing you would find him. Elena folded the letter and put it in her purse. She wasn't sure if she believed Kowalski's words, but they provided a small measure of comfort. 5 years after the trial, Elena stood in the gymnasium at Roosevelt High School, surrounded by family and friends. The school had decided to retire the jersey numbers of the 7 missing players, and Elena had been asked to speak at the ceremony. She looked up at the rafters where Miguel's number would soon hang permanently, a memorial to a life cut short and dreams unfulfilled. Miguel would have been 45 years old today, she began. He might have been a college basketball coach himself, or perhaps a teacher. He might have had children of his own. We'll never know what he could have accomplished, but we can remember who he was. She paused, looking out at the crowd of current students, parents, and community members who had gathered to honor the memory of the 7 boys. Miguel believed in hard work, in teamwork, and in never giving up. Even in his final days, according to the evidence we found, he was trying to protect his teammates and find a way to bring them all home. That's the Miguel I want you to remember, not as a victim, but as a young man who faced unimaginable circumstances with courage and love for his friends. As the ceremony concluded and Miguel's number was raised to the rafters, Elena felt Carlos take her hand. They had survived the worst thing that can happen to parents, and while the pain would never fully go away, they had found a way to honor their son's memory and help prevent other families from experiencing the same loss. The investigation into Kowalski's network had led to reforms in youth sports programs, better background checks for coaches, and increased awareness of the signs of exploitation. Miguel's death had not been in vain if it helped protect other young athletes. Elena walked through the community center where a new basketball program had been established in memory of the 7 boys. The Miguel Morales Memorial League provided free basketball training and mentorship to underprivileged youth, with strict oversight and transparency measures in place. She watched as a group of teenagers practiced their free throws, their laughter echoing through the gymnasium. This was what Miguel would have wanted: young people having the opportunity to pursue their dreams safely with the support of their community. "Mrs. Morales?" One of the young players approached her. "Coach says you're Miguel's mom. I just wanted to say that we're honored to play in his memory." Elena smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in years. Miguel would be proud to know that his story is helping other young athletes. Keep working hard, and remember that basketball is just a game. Your safety and your family always come first. As she left the community center, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The discovery of the jerseys had started a chain of events that led to justice for Miguel and the other boys, but more importantly, it had led to positive changes that would protect future generations of young athletes. The pain of losing Miguel would never completely go away, but Elena had found a way to transform that pain into something meaningful. In honoring her son's memory and working to prevent similar tragedies, she had found a purpose that gave her strength to continue. 28 years after Miguel's disappearance, Elena Morales finally had the closure she had been seeking. Her son was gone, but his legacy lived on in the lives of the young people who benefited from the programs created in his memory. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the fog rolled in from the bay, she could almost hear the sound of a basketball bouncing on a court, and she knew that Miguel was still with them, watching over the next generation of dreamers. The story of the missing Roosevelt High basketball team had become a cautionary tale about the dangers that young athletes can face, but it was also a story of love, perseverance, and the power of a community to heal and protect its children. In the end, that was Miguel's greatest victory. Not a championship game or a college scholarship, but the knowledge that his life and death had made a difference in the world. Elena Morales had spent more than 2 decades searching for her son, and in finding him, she had found a way to honor his memory and help others. The investigation was closed, the perpetrator was behind bars, and the community was stronger and more vigilant than ever before. The missing team had finally come home,